In episode 12, we saw how science transformed human knowledge. Now comes the Enlightenment, an age when reason challenged tradition and new ideas of freedom reshaped society. Now, when we talk about the greatest moments in history, we often think of wars and revolutions, but sometimes changes that seem quiet are even more important. That's what happened during the Enlightenment. It started around the year 1600 and lasted about 200 years. It changed the way people thought about politics, society, and the world. People began to question old ideas about kings and churches and start thinking about new ways of doing things. And it all started with one simple thing: books. Not just any books, though. These were special books filled with new ideas written by thinkers who had some pretty radical thoughts about the world. Now, these guys weren't writing about magic spells or secret potions. They were talking about stuff that really mattered to all of us, like our freedom and our rights. Let's meet some of them. First, there was John Locke. John Locke, he was an English philosopher who lived from 1632 to 1704. He wrote something called Two Treatises of Government. It was kind of like a rulebook for how the government should treat its people. According to Locke, everyone is born with what he called natural rights, things that belong to everyone simply because they are a human being. These rights included the right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to own property. But what if the government didn't play by these rules? Locke said that the people have a right to overthrow the government if it doesn't protect their rights. This idea was really revolutionary. Back then, most people thought that the king was above the law and couldn't be questioned. But Locke was saying that the king's power comes from the people and that they have the ultimate say in how they are governed. Then there was Voltaire. He was a French writer and thinker who lived from 1694 to 1778. He wrote tons of books and articles that made fun of the leaders in Europe. For example, he criticized the King of France for having absolute power and no one to keep him in check. He also fought for freedom of speech and religion. Back then, if you said something that the king didn't like, you could get thrown in jail or even put to death. But Voltaire argued that people should be free to say what they think and worship how they want without fear of punishment. He also thought that women should be treated equally to men and that slavery should be abolished. Voltaire was a bit of a troublemaker, but he never backed down from speaking his mind. Finally, there was Montesquieu. He was a French philosopher who lived from 1689 to 1755. He is best known for his book called The Spirit of the Laws. In this book, he talked about how the government should be divided into three branches: the executive, which carries out laws, the legislative, which makes laws, and the judicial, which interprets laws. This way, no one person or group would have too much power. Then, each branch would keep the others in check. Montesquieu's ideas were like a game of tug-of-war. He wanted power to be shared between different groups so that no one could become too powerful and take away the freedom of the people. These thinkers were like the superheroes of the Enlightenment. They had different powers and fought for different causes, but they all wanted to make the world a better place. How did their ideas change the world? Well, let me tell you. Imagine you reliving in a small town where everyone does things the same way they've always been done. The town is ruled by a king who has absolute power. You don't have a say in how things are run, and you can't even speak your mind for fear of punishment. Life is tough and you feel like things could be better. Then suddenly, boom, you find a magical book that introduces you to these revolutionary ideas. You learn about your rights, about how the government should work, and about how you can fight for a better future. That's exactly what happened to people during the Enlightenment. The ideas of Locke, Voltaire, and Montesquieu spread like wildfire. People started questioning the old ways of doing things and demanding change. Suddenly, the idea of overthrowing a tyrannical king or abolishing slavery didn't seem so crazy. These thinkers gave people the tools to fight for their rights and demand a better future. And it wasn't just the big shots who were talking about these ideas. Ordinary people got in on the action, too. Salons became all the rage. These were fancy parties where people would dress up and discuss the latest ideas. There were salons for artists, scientists, and philosophers. Everyone was talking about the new ideas of the Enlightenment. And guess what? It worked. The ideas of the Enlightenment led to major changes in Europe and the rest of the world. Revolutions broke out and new governments were formed. Slavery was abolished and the rights of women and minorities were fought for. All of this happened because a few brave thinkers dared to challenge the status quo and question the old ways of doing things. Now, let's take a closer look at what happened. First, there was the American Revolution. In 1776, the American colonies overthrew the British monarchy and established a new government based on the principles of the Enlightenment. The Declaration of Independence, which declared the independence of the United States, was a clear example of Locke's ideas in action. The document stated that all people are created equal and have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It also said that the government's job is to protect these rights and that the people have the power to overthrow the government if it does unteed next. There was the French Revolution. In 1789, the French people overthrew their king and established a new government based on the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The storming of the Bastille, a famous prison in Paris, is seen as the start of the revolution. The revolution was inspired by the American Revolution and the ideas of the Enlightenment, such as popular sovereignty, the separation of powers, and the protection of individual rights. Finally, there was the Haitian Revolution in 1791. The people of Haiti, who were mostly enslaved Africans, revolted against the French colonial government. The revolution was inspired by the ideals of the Enlightenment, such as the equality of all people and the right to overthrow oppressive governments. It was the first successful slave rebellion and led to the establishment of the first black republic in the world. So you can see that the Enlightenment had a huge impact on the world, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some people, especially those in power, didn't like the ideas of the Enlightenment. They tried to suppress them, but they couldn't stop them. The ideas spread like wildfire and eventually led to major changes in the way we live today. The Enlightenment may have ended, but its ideas live on. We still talk about natural rights, separation of powers, and freedom of speech, and we still debate how to balance the power of the government with the rights of the people. That's why it's so important to study the Enlightenment. It helps us understand where our modern ideas of freedom and democracy came from and how to protect them. In the next episode, we will witness the American and French revolutions, when ideas became action. Before we go, let's quickly recap what we've learned. The Enlightenment was a time when reason and freedom of thought were celebrated. Thinkers like John Locke, Voltaire, and Montesquieu challenged traditional ideas about government and society. They believed in the power of education and knowledge to improve people's lives, and their ideas inspired revolutions and reforms around the world. Remember, the Enlightenment was a time of great change and progress, but it was also a time of debate and controversy. The ideas of the Enlightenment continue to shape our world today, so it's important to understand this time period and the people who lived through it. Now it's time to ask yourself, what do you think? What's your favorite thing about the Enlightenment? Who are your favorite thinkers and why? And how do you think the Enlightenment continues to shape our world today? Let us know your answers in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.